The other day, I popped into Woolies to grab my usual shop: milk, bread, eggs, and a bit of meat for the week. But when I got to the checkout, I nearly asked the cashier to scan everything again. The total was ridiculous. A simple pack of mints that used to be around $10 was now over $15, and a block of cheese I used to pay $9 for was nearly $13. And it's not just me feeling this. Every time I chat with my family, everyone says the same thing. It feels like we're spending more and getting less. And it's not just a feeling. It's the reality. Food inflation is still high, and major supermarket chains like Coles and Woolies aren't just passing on costs, they're making record profits. And to make matters worse, some brands I've been buying for years are now coming in smaller packages for the same price. It's happening across the board. Later in this video, I'll show you just how far supermarkets are taking this trick, and you might be shocked by some of the worst offenders. But why is this happening? Have costs really gone up? Or are supermarkets taking advantage and fattening their margins? And more importantly, is this going to get better, or are things only going to get worse? If you've been feeling the impact of these rising prices too, drop a like and comment below which products have been hitting your wallet the hardest. And if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. The other day, I was chatting with a mate about grocery prices, and he just sighed and said, "Mate, I remember when $50 filled a trolley, now it barely fills a basket." And honestly, that feeling of spending more and getting less isn't just in our heads. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, between 2023 and 2024, egg prices rose by 11%, cooking oil by 7%, lamb by 17%, and fruit and vegetables by an average of 6%. Every time you reach the checkout, you feel it. Even though overall inflation has slowed, food prices continue to be an exception. And the frustrating part? It's not just that things have gotten more expensive, it's that the problem runs much deeper. The rising cost of food isn't just about global inflation, but also about what's happening right here in Australia. The supply chain is getting more expensive, supermarkets are increasing their profit margins, and extreme weather events are disrupting production. If you've ever walked into a supermarket and seen a head of lettuce selling for over $6, you can thank extreme weather for that. Floods in North Queensland and droughts in the south have been severely impacting agricultural production. And when farmers suffer, we feel it at the checkout. Queensland alone grows 94% of Australia's bananas, so any disruption there means empty shelves and higher prices. Faced with this, Australians have had to completely change the way they shop and eat. Many families are ditching red meat and opting for cheaper protein sources like chicken, eggs, and even canned goods. The demand for frozen and canned foods has also surged because they're cheaper and last longer. According to a recent survey, over 50% of consumers said they've changed their shopping habits in the past 2 years. One trend that's caught a lot of attention is the nostalgic price comparisons flooding social media. One viral example was a mum who posted a supermarket receipt from 2005 showing that back then she spent $77.01 for 33 items. Today, that exact same grocery list would cost over $132. These comparisons highlight just how much purchasing power has eroded and why so many people feel like their money is vanishing as soon as they step into the supermarket. At the same time, many households are moving away from meat and opting for cheaper staples like grains, canned goods, and pasta. The surge in home-cooked meals is also a direct response to this crisis, with fewer people dining out or ordering takeaway. Another factor that's making things worse is the massive price gap between urban and rural areas. In cities like Sydney and Melbourne, prices are high, but at least consumers have options and competition between supermarkets. But in remote communities, it's a whole different story. The government has announced plans to reduce this disparity, but many of these initiatives haven't been implemented yet. Until then, people living outside major cities continue to pay significantly more for basic groceries. The cost of transporting goods to rural areas drives up the price of everyday essentials. In some Indigenous communities in Northern Australia, a litre of milk can cost over $8 and a kilo of meat can go for more than $40. On top of rising prices, shoppers are also dealing with shrinkflation, a sneaky tactic where companies quietly reduce the size of a product while keeping the price the same or even increasing it. The perfect example? During Christmas, shoppers noticed that popular desserts at Woolies and Aldi were smaller than the year before, yet their prices had gone up. And it's not just seasonal treats. Chocolate bars, biscuits, cereals, yogurts. Maybe you've even opened a bag of chips and realised there's more air than actual chips inside. The worst part? Most people don't even realise it's happening until they've already bought the product, and prices aren't going down, they're rising. Even though overall inflation in the country has slowed, food prices remain one of Australians' biggest concerns. With grocery costs increasing faster than wages, many families are adjusting their shopping habits, switching to budget-friendly staples, cutting out non-essentials, and relying more on discounts just to keep meals consistent. And it's not just lower-income households feeling the pinch. Even middle-class families that used to be able to save money at the end of the month are now struggling to balance their budgets. The supermarket trip that used to be a simple routine has now turned into a game of compromise. What can you swap out? What can you skip? What simply doesn't fit into the budget anymore? More people are heading to farmers markets and community grocers looking for cheaper options, but even these places aren't as affordable as they used to be. If you've been feeling the pinch, let us know in the comments. Which grocery items have hit your wallet the hardest lately? If there's one thing that's impossible to ignore, it's that while grocery prices keep rising and Australians struggle to make ends meet, supermarkets are raking in record profits. A trip to Coles or Woolies is no longer just a routine errand. It's a financial endurance test. The problem? While we're all trying to cut back and make our dollars stretch further, these major retailers continue to announce billion-dollar profits. In 2024, Coles reported a 2.1% increase in net profit after tax, reaching approximately 1.12 billion Australian dollars. Meanwhile, Woolworths posted a net profit of 108 million Australian dollars, a 93.3% drop from the previous year, largely due to a 1.5 billion Australian dollars devaluation of its New Zealand operations. However, excluding this adjustment, Woolworths' net profit stood at 1.7 billion Australian dollars, a slight decline of 0.6%. Despite this reduction in net profit, Woolworths' total revenue grew by 5.6%, reaching 67.9 billion Australian dollars. While we're feeling the pinch at the checkout, these corporations continue to protect their profit margins, even when production costs go down. The result? Consumers pay more, while shareholders celebrate. Experts have been warning for years that Australian supermarkets deliberately increase prices to maintain and expand their profit margins, regardless of fluctuations in supplier costs. And what's most frustrating? These price hikes aren't just a response to rising costs. A 2024 investigation by the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission revealed that supermarkets do not pass cost reductions onto consumers. A report from March 2024 showed that even when transport and agricultural production costs fell in the second half of 2023, grocery prices continued to rise, leading to record profit margins. In other words, even when supermarkets pay less for products, we keep paying more. The ACCC also identified a sneaky tactic that supermarkets have used for years: gradual, almost imperceptible price increases. Instead of raising the price of a product all at once, they make small adjustments over time, making it harder for consumers to notice. This has been happening with essential items like bread and milk, things people buy regularly. And by the time you realise what's happening, you're already paying significantly more than you were at the start of the year. The situation is even worse because the Australian supermarket industry is essentially a duopoly. Coles and Woolworths control about 65% of the market, leaving consumers with very few alternatives. Compare this to countries like the UK, where competition is much more balanced between major retailers like Tesco, Sainsbury's, Aldi, and Lidl. In Australia, however, the lack of competitors means less price pressure, and supermarkets have more power to set prices without fear of losing customers. And it gets worse. These companies aren't just dominating the market, they're actively preventing competition. Reports indicate that Coles and Woolworths buy up land around their stores to block competing supermarkets, especially in rural areas, ensuring residents have no choice but to pay inflated prices. It's no surprise that these practices have triggered official investigations. In September 2024, the ACCC filed a lawsuit against Coles and Woolworths, accusing them of misleading price promotions. You've probably seen slogans like "prices dropped" or "down, down" in their advertising, but according to the investigation, many of these so-called discounts weren't real. The prices were raised just before the promotions began, making the discount appear bigger than it actually was. Consumers have also launched class action lawsuits against the supermarkets, claiming they were misled by deceptive pricing tactics. Coles has already issued a statement saying it will vigorously defend itself against these accusations, while Woolworths is facing similar legal challenges. As public frustration grows, the Australian government has introduced a mandatory code of conduct for the supermarket sector, imposing fines of up to 10 million Australian dollars for retailers caught manipulating prices unfairly. But will these fines actually be enough to stop supermarkets from exploiting consumers? The numbers don't lie. The issue of food price inflation in Australia isn't just about external factors like production and transport costs. There is a clear strategy at play, one designed to protect and expand profit margins, regardless of how much it hurts consumers. The question now is whether new regulations and investigations will actually change anything, or if supermarkets will just find new ways to keep increasing prices while pretending to offer better deals. You don't need to be an expert to see that grocery shopping has become a real hit to the wallet. Just take a look around the supermarket. Trolleys aren't as full as they used to be, and people are double-checking prices before heading to the checkout. What used to be automatic, grabbing some meat for the week, fresh fruit and the usual staples, has now become a strategic decision. It's not just me. It seems like everyone has their own story about how they've had to change their grocery habits. Remember when a Sunday roast was just a normal thing? Now it's a special occasion. Lamb, for example, has gone up 17% in the past year. With beef and lamb becoming too expensive for many families, more Aussies are switching to cheaper alternatives like chicken, eggs, or even plant-based proteins. And for those still buying meat, it's all about stretching meals further. Smaller portions, more leftovers, and bulk buying when prices drop. The traditional weekend barbie, for a lot of households, it's been scaled down, or swapped for more affordable meals that stretch further. You can also see the impact of inflation in the massive spike in sales of canned goods, pasta and frozen meals, which have become the most practical options for many families. What used to be a choice is now a necessity. People are filling their trolleys with products that last longer and stretch further. Sales of canned goods have jumped by 25% in the past year, especially for items like tuna, ready-made soups, and preserved vegetables. People are also shifting towards food that requires fewer additional ingredients. For example, ready-made frozen meals are booming because they eliminate the need to buy multiple fresh ingredients, which are now significantly more expensive. Supermarkets were quick to notice this shift in consumer behaviour, and they've adjusted their strategies accordingly. Woolworths has reported a significant increase in sales of its private label products, which are usually cheaper than big-name brands. Retailers have expanded their frozen and canned food sections, knowing shoppers are prioritising longer-lasting, budget-friendly options. Chains like Coles and Aldi have also started offering bulk packs of mince, rice and pasta, catering to shoppers who are trying to reduce costs without sacrificing portion sizes. At the same time, weekly specials have become more aggressive. Have you noticed how supermarkets are now competing harder than ever with promotions? They've realised that shoppers are keeping an eye on discounts, so they've stepped up their game with tactics like limited time price drops and discounts for bulk purchases. But for some, cutting back on spending isn't enough. Many families simply can't afford their groceries anymore. Food Bank Australia, one of the country's largest food relief organisations, has reported a 60% increase in demand for free food over the past year. The demand has surged so much that some food banks are now struggling to keep up, with reports of shortages making it impossible to assist every family in need. What's most shocking is that these queues aren't just filled with the unemployed or those in extreme poverty. There are working Australians, people with stable jobs and families who simply can't afford their groceries anymore. With food banks overwhelmed, community groups and churches have stepped in, providing free meals for those facing food insecurity. And when even food banks can't meet the demand, families do what they can to get by. The impact of inflation has been so severe that many families have not only changed what they buy, but also how often they eat. A recent study found that around 30% of low-income households in Australia have had to skip meals just to cover other essential bills. And the numbers are even more alarming when looking at the broader issue of food insecurity. According to the Global Food Banking Network, approximately 3.24 million Australians live below the poverty line, and between 625,000 and 1 million people rely on food assistance every month. That's a shocking reality. When people are cutting back on meals just to afford rent or electricity, you realise how deep this crisis really is. Skipping breakfast has become a common way to save money. Others reduce their portion sizes at dinner or stretch leftovers for extra meals. Staples like pasta and rice have become dietary essentials because they're cheap and keep you full for longer. Some of these changes might sound like smart budgeting strategies in tough times, but when simply affording food means having to ration meals, something is seriously wrong. This shift in shopping and eating habits shows just how deeply supermarket inflation is impacting Australians. Every day, families are making difficult choices just to ensure they have enough to eat. If someone had told you a few years ago that Australians would be rationing their meals, it would have sounded absurd. But here we are. The question now is, how long will this continue? The government is trying to ease the financial strain. Supermarkets are adjusting their strategies, but for now, it's everyday Australians who are paying the price. The other day, I was chatting with some mates when someone asked, "Do you reckon prices will ever go back to normal?" And that question really stuck with me. Normal? What even is normal anymore? What once seemed like a temporary phase, prices creeping up due to global inflation, has now become the everyday reality for Aussie shoppers. Honestly, it'd be great to say that things will soon go back to how they were. But is that really going to happen? Or has this new normal become permanent? If your grocery bill keeps climbing every time you hit the shops, it's hard to imagine prices ever settling down again. But what do the experts say? Will prices finally stabilise? Or have we not even seen the worst of this crisis yet? If you're expecting food prices to drop anytime soon, you might want to lower your expectations. While overall inflation slowed to 2.4% by the end of 2024, grocery prices are still climbing faster than the national average. And don't think this is just a short-term issue. Experts warn that the problem isn't just global inflation, it's also how the local market is structured. Rising transport, packaging, and labour costs are being passed straight onto consumers with no sign of relief in sight. On top of that, domestic factors like supermarket dominance and unpredictable agricultural costs make food prices even harder to stabilise. Rabobank has already warned that food prices in Australia won't just stay high, they could become a long-term structural problem for the economy. In other words, instead of hoping for a price drop, we might have to prepare for this being the new normal. So, what's the government doing about all this? They've introduced a few measures, but so far, the impact has been limited. One of the biggest recent actions was subsidising 30 essential grocery items in remote communities where food prices are even higher than in the cities. While this provides some relief, it only reaches a small portion of consumers and does nothing to address the wider affordability crisis across the country. At the same time, there's been a push to tackle shrinkflation by requiring supermarkets to display clearer unit pricing on labels. But let's be real. Whether it's subsidies or price transparency policies, none of these measures actually stop prices from rising. At best, they help consumers notice the tricks being played on them, but at the end of the day, they're still paying more. The government can try to cut energy costs and introduce policies to support agricultural production, but as long as major supermarket chains hold all the power over pricing, consumers will keep footing the bill. One thing's for sure, Aussie shoppers are changing their habits to push back against rising prices, and that might be the only real way to push back against continuous increases. One growing trend is buying seasonal produce, which is often cheaper. In January, for example, melons and nectarines were among the most cost-effective fruit options. This might seem like a small detail, but for those looking to save, adjusting their diet based on what's in season can make a noticeable difference. Another increasingly popular strategy is reducing food waste. People are being more mindful about not buying food that might spoil and planning meals better to stretch their grocery budget further. More shoppers are also choosing frozen meat and bulk packaged vegetables, since they cost less in the long run and reduce the risk of waste. The big question now is, are we just going to have to accept paying more for less? Or is there still hope that prices might improve? If food inflation keeps climbing and supermarkets continue to dominate the market, the outlook isn't great. But if real competition reforms come into play and greater pressure is placed on major retailers, then maybe, just maybe, we could see prices return to something more reasonable. The next few months might see inflation slow down a bit, but that doesn't mean food prices will drop much. And if nothing changes in the way the market operates or how supermarkets control pricing, the reality is that we'll keep paying more for groceries with few alternatives. But will this change? The government is introducing some measures and consumers are adjusting their habits, but will that be enough? Or are we just going to accept this as the new normal and keep finding ways to save money while supermarkets continue making record profits? If this video has helped you better understand what's happening with food prices in Australia, I'm really glad. This channel is just getting started and every bit of support makes a difference. So, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and share this video so more people can stay informed. And if you want to know where to invest your money in Australia this year, click on this video here. I'll see you there.